The alarm rang through Unity Prime Station with a sound that made every species present stop what they were doing. Captain Daniel Wright looked up from his datapad as the emergency lights began flashing red across the massive council chamber. Around him, representatives from 20 different alien civilizations rushed to their seats. Daniel had been Earth's military advisor to the Galactic Council for 2 years now. He had seen tensions before, border disputes and trade conflicts that seemed important at the time. But he had never seen this kind of panic in the eyes of species that had survived for thousands of years among the stars. The Zenthari ambassador materialized at the center podium, her translucent form shimmering with distress. The Zenthari were telepaths, ancient and wise. And right now, their representative looked terrified. That alone told Daniel something was deeply wrong. "The Devourers have returned," she said simply. The chamber erupted into chaos. Daniel heard the translation in his earpiece as different species shouted over each other. The Krav Empire's War Master, a massive creature covered in armored plates, slammed his fist on the table hard enough to crack the surface. The Velen Concordate's science minister began pulling up holographic displays faster than Daniel could follow. "Explain," Daniel said quietly to Kevin Ross, Earth's ambassador, who sat beside him. Kevin was a career diplomat, calm and measured, but even he looked shaken. "Before your time," Kevin whispered back. "Before humanity even knew there were aliens. 50,000 years ago, something came from the void between galaxies. They called them the Devourers, biomechanical swarms that consumed everything. 17 civilizations died before the Devourers just vanished back into dark space." The Zenthari ambassador continued speaking, and the holographic display above the council chamber came to life. Daniel watched as it showed a region of space he recognized as being about 600 light-years from Earth. There, emerging from what the maps labeled as the void, were thousands of signals. "Our deep space sensors detected the Vanguard 3 days ago," the Zenthari said. "We have confirmed the signature. It matches historical records perfectly. The Devourers are returning, and they are heading toward populated space." Commander Lisa Martinez appeared on Daniel's communication screen. She was aboard the Earth defense vessel Horizon, positioned near the station. "Sir, are you seeing this data feed they're sending out?" "I'm seeing it," Daniel replied. "These things consumed 17 civilizations? That's what they're saying." The Krav War Master stood, his voice booming across the chamber. "I have reviewed the historical archives. Every species that fought the Devourers was destroyed. Those that fled early enough survived. The mathematics are clear. We cannot win this fight." A Velen scientist projected calculations that filled the air with numbers and probability curves. Daniel didn't understand most of it, but he understood the final figure that appeared in bright red. 0.003% chance of victory. "We must evacuate," the Velen said. "Begin immediate withdrawal of all populated systems in the projected path. We have perhaps 6 months before the main swarm arrives. We can save our people if we act now." Daniel stood up. "You're talking about running? Without even trying to fight?" The Zenthari ambassador turned her attention to him. He felt a gentle pressure in his mind, a side effect of her telepathic nature. "Captain Wright, your species is young. You do not understand deep time. The weight of millennia. The civilizations that fought the Devourers 50,000 years ago were far more advanced than any species here today. They had weapons we can barely comprehend. They still lost. Then we build better weapons," Daniel argued. "We work together, pool our resources." The Krav War Master made a sound that the translator rendered as bitter laughter. "Humans, so eager to fight. The Devourers adapt. Captain, whatever weapon you use against them, they learn to counter within hours. The old records show it clearly. The Zephyrini used quantum disruptors. The Devourers adapted. The Korath used biological warfare. The Devourers adapted. The Talcath collapsed stars on them. The Devourers survived and adapted. So what?" Daniel said, feeling his temper rise. "We just give up entire sectors of space? Let them take whatever they want?" We preserve our species, the Zenthari said softly. There is no shame in survival, Captain. Your people will understand this when you have existed as long as we have. The council voted 4 hours later. 20 species voted to begin immediate evacuation protocols. One species, humanity, voted to fight. Daniel stood in the observation deck of Unity Prime, watching as the first alien fleet prepared to depart. Admiral Patricia Cole appeared beside him, her face grim. She commanded Earth's fleet, 23 military vessels that seemed like toys compared to the massive Krav warships. They're really leaving, Patricia said. They're really leaving, Daniel confirmed. Ships began jumping to faster-than-light travel, disappearing in flashes of light. The Velen fleet went first, their sleek vessels vanishing in perfect formation. The Krav Empire followed, their massive dreadnoughts creating ripples in space-time as they departed. Kevin Ross joined them at the window. The Zenthari are offering us evacuation slots. They say they can take 10,000 humans to their protected colonies in deep space. What did you tell them? Daniel asked. I told them I would relay the offer to Earth. They all knew what the answer would be. Daniel had already received preliminary reports from Earth Command. Every human colony, every settlement from Mars to the outer mining stations, had voted. The count was unanimous. They would fight. A holographic communication request came through. Daniel accepted it, and the face of a Velen science master appeared. The alien's features were delicate, almost fragile-looking, but their eyes held the weight of a civilization 10,000 years old. Captain Wright, the Velen said, I wanted to speak with you before we depart. To try to convince me to run? Daniel asked. No, I know better than that. I have studied your species. You are brave, perhaps foolishly so. I wanted to tell you that we will remember you. When the Devourers have passed and we return to reclaim what remains, we will honor Earth's sacrifice. We're not dead yet, Daniel said. The Velen's expression was sad. You will be. The mathematics are absolute. But I want you to know, your courage is admirable. Your extinction is inevitable, but admirable nonetheless. The communication ended. Daniel turned to Patricia and Kevin. Get everyone back to Earth. It's time to go home. What are we going to do? Kevin asked. We're going to fight, Daniel said. Because that's what humans do. The last alien ship departed Unity Prime 6 hours later. The massive station, built to house representatives from across the galaxy, sat empty, except for the small human delegation. Daniel stood in the council chamber one final time, looking at the empty seats. Lisa's voice came through his communicator. Sir, we're ready to return to Earth on your order. Begin departure sequence, Daniel ordered. And Lisa, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them to prepare for war. Tell them we're the only ones left standing between the Devourers and everything we've ever built. And if they ask about our chances? Lisa asked. Daniel looked at the holographic display, still showing the Devourer vanguard moving steadily toward human space. 600 light-years away. 6 months. Maybe less. Tell them the truth, Daniel said. Tell them it looks impossible. Tell them we're going to fight anyway. As the horizon pulled away from Unity Prime, Daniel took one last look at the station that represented galactic civilization. It would sit empty now, abandoned in the face of an ancient threat. Humanity would face the Devourers alone, with ships that were barely a match for regular alien military vessels, let alone a force that had consumed 17 advanced civilizations. But they would face them. Because in the end, humanity had never been good at running away. The Situation Room on Earth was filled with screens showing star maps, fleet positions, and probability calculations. President Helen Grant stood at the center of it all, her hands pressed flat against the strategy table. Around her, the Unified Human Military Command waited for her to speak. Daniel Wright had returned from Unity Prime 3 days ago. Now he stood beside Admiral Patricia Cole and Dr. Andrew Kim, Earth's leading expert on alien biology. The room held representatives from every major nation on Earth, every colony in the solar system, and every military force humanity could gather. 72 hours since they left us, Helen said, her voice steady. I've received the vote counts from every settlement. Mars Colony. Unanimous vote to fight. Europa Station. Unanimous. Titan Base. Unanimous. Every single human outpost, every ship, every station. Not one evacuation request filed. She looked around the room. We stand together then. The question is, how we stand. Daniel stepped forward and activated the holographic display. It showed the path of the Devourer Vanguard, moving steadily toward the outer edge of human space. We have one advantage the other species didn't have, he said. What advantage? Asked General Richard Hayes, commander of Earth's ground forces. We're less advanced than the Krav. We have fewer ships than the Velen. Our weapons are primitive compared to what the Zenthari can do. Exactly, Daniel said. We're unpredictable. Every species that fought the Devourers before had a unified strategy. The Krav used overwhelming firepower because that's what they always do. The Velen used advanced technology because that's their strength. The Zenthari used psychic warfare because that's what they know. Andrew stepped forward, pulling up data from the old archives that the aliens had left behind. I've been studying the historical records. The Devourers adapt. But they adapt to patterns. If you hit them with quantum weapons, they develop quantum shielding. If you use biological attacks, they develop immunity. They're essentially a learning machine. So how do we fight something that learns? Helen asked. We don't give them a pattern to learn, Lisa Martinez said. She had been promoted to Chief Tactical Officer for Earth's combined fleet. We fight differently every single time. We use tactics that don't make sense, strategies that contradict each other, weapons that have no logical connection. Patricia nodded slowly. We fight like humans. Messy, chaotic, unpredictable. Over the next 2 weeks, humanity prepared for a war unlike any they had fought before. Lisa organized the fleet into independent squadrons, each with complete tactical freedom. Some would use aggressive assault tactics. Others would fight defensively. Some would use conventional weapons. Others would jury-rig whatever they could think of. Captain Nicole Barnes commanded the forward scout fleet, 12 small vessels positioned at the edge of human space. She was young for a captain, only 32, but she had earned her command through skill and dedication. Now she sat in the command chair of the scout ship Ranger, watching her sensors very carefully. Contact, her sensor officer said. Multiple signatures, matching Devourer Vanguard pattern. Nicole felt her heart rate increase but kept her voice calm. How many? 50 ships? Captain. They just entered detection range near the abandoned Krav colony at Sigma Station. The Krav had evacuated Sigma Station 2 weeks ago, leaving behind massive defense platforms and weapon systems. The Devourers would reach it in less than 6 hours. Send the data to Earth Command, Nicole ordered. Then prepare the fleet for engagement. It's time to see if our theories work. Daniel received the contact report in the middle of a strategy meeting. He immediately opened a communication channel to Nicole. Captain Barnes, you are authorized to engage at your discretion. Remember the protocol. Fight your way. Not by the book. Understood, sir, Nicole replied. We'll make it interesting for them. The 12 scout ships approached Sigma Station using completely different flight patterns. Some came in fast and aggressive. Others drifted slowly as if damaged. 2 ships flew in a wide spiral for no tactical reason at all. The Devourers had to be watching, trying to understand what they were seeing. The Devourer ships were unlike anything in the human database. They looked organic, with curved surfaces that seemed to shift and change. Biomechanical, just like the report said. Each one was about the size of a human frigate, covered in what looked like both armor plating and living tissue. Nicole gave the order to engage when the Devourers were within weapons range. What happened next would have made any traditional military commander furious. 3 ships opened fire with conventional missiles. 2 ships used experimental laser arrays. 1 ship deployed old-fashioned kinetic rounds, basically big chunks of metal fired at high speed. Another ship released a cloud of electronic warfare drones. One captain decided to ram his ship into the Devourer formation at full speed, firing everything he had, then pulling away at the last second. The Devourers tried to respond, but their return fire was scattered and unfocused. Their weapons seemed designed to counter specific threats. But they kept switching targets as the human tactics changed from second to second. Nicole watched her tactical display with fierce concentration. They're confused. Look at their formation. It keeps shifting. They can't figure out what we're doing because we're not doing anything consistent. A Devourer ship locked onto the Ranger and fired some kind of energy weapon. Nicole's pilot, Lieutenant Gary Foster, threw the ship into a roll that no military academy would have approved. The energy beam missed by 20 meters. Return fire, Nicole ordered. Alternate between missiles and lasers, random intervals. The battle lasted 40 minutes. The human scout fleet lost 2 ships and had 3 more heavily damaged. But they destroyed 8 Devourer vessels and forced the rest to withdraw. The remaining Devourer ships retreated back into deep space, presumably to report what they had encountered. Back on Earth, the command room erupted in cheers when the results came through. It was humanity's first victory against the Devourers in 50,000 years. More importantly, it proved the theory worked. They couldn't adapt, Andrew said, studying the combat data. Look at this. Every time they started to counter one tactic, we switched to something else. Their learning ability is incredible, but it needs time and consistency. We didn't give them either. Helen authorized sending the combat footage to the fleeing alien species. Most ignored it. A few Zenthari telepaths sent back cautious messages, reporting that they sensed something impossible in the data. The Krav military analysts reviewed it but sent no response. The Velen scientists asked for more information but made no commitment to return. Humanity was still alone. Daniel knew the first battle was just the beginning. Nicole's fleet had faced 50 ships. The full Devourer vanguard numbered in the thousands. And behind that vanguard, somewhere in deep space, was the main swarm. Intelligence suggested it might contain 50,000 ships or more. We have 4 weeks, Patricia said during the next command meeting. 4 weeks until the main Devourer force reaches our territory. We need to use this time to prepare every defense we have. Lisa pulled up a map of human space. I recommend we abandon the outer colonies. Pull everyone back to the core systems. Concentrate our forces around Earth, Mars, and the major stations. No, Daniel said firmly. If we give up territory without fighting, we're doing exactly what the Devourers want. We spread out, we fight them everywhere, we make them adapt to 1,000 different battlefields. That will cost lives, Helen said quietly. Everything will cost lives, Daniel replied. But if we make them fight for every meter of space, if we hit them with different tactics at every colony, every station, every asteroid base, then maybe we can slow them down enough to find a real weakness. The decision was made. Humanity would fight a running battle across their entire territory. Every colony received instructions to prepare defenses but to fight in their own way. Mining stations were told to use industrial equipment as weapons. Research bases were encouraged to experiment with whatever they could create. Military vessels were given complete freedom to develop their own tactics. In the 3 weeks that followed, humanity fought 17 separate engagements with Devourer scout forces. They won 9, lost 6, and fought 2 to a draw. The casualty count was rising, but so was their understanding of the enemy. Andrew made a critical discovery during the 3rd week. While analyzing debris from destroyed Devourer ships, he found something in their biomechanical structure that looked like a neural network. They're connected, he explained to Daniel and Patricia. Not just to each other, but to some kind of hive intelligence. Every ship they lose, every tactic they encounter, it all gets fed back to the collective. So they're learning from every fight, Patricia said. Yes. But there's more. Look at this cellular structure. It's designed for pattern recognition and rapid adaptation. But pattern recognition requires patterns. If we keep giving them chaos, if we keep fighting in ways that don't follow any logical structure, we might be able to damage that network. Daniel looked at the microscopic images Andrew was showing. You're saying our unpredictability isn't just slowing them down. It's actually hurting them? Maybe. I need more data to be sure. But I think their hive intelligence is struggling to process what we're doing. It's like trying to solve an equation that has no solution. The system keeps working harder and harder, using more and more resources, but it can't find an answer. On the 28th day after the aliens fled, the main devourer swarm entered human sensor range. The numbers were worse than intelligence had predicted. 73,000 ships, all moving in perfect formation toward human space. Daniel stood in the command center, looking at the display. Beside him, Helen prepared to address the planet. Around them, military officers coordinated the final defensive preparations. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "even with everything we've learned, those numbers are impossible." "I know," Daniel said. "Our entire fleet is 3,000 military vessels, and maybe 7,000 armed civilian ships if we count everything that can fly and shoot." "I know. The math says we can't win." Daniel turned to look at her. "The math also said we would be dead by now. The math said they would adapt to our tactics in hours. The math didn't account for human stubbornness." Lisa smiled despite the situation. "Stubbornness? That's our secret weapon?" "Among other things," Daniel said. "Get our forces ready. When they arrive, we're going to show them exactly what humans can do when we're backed into a corner." The devourer swarm would reach Earth in 48 hours. Humanity prepared for the fight of their existence, knowing the galaxy had already written them off as dead. But humans had a long history of proving the impossible was merely difficult. The devourer advance force hit the outer colonies exactly when predicted. Commander Jack Peterson watched from the bridge of his destroyer as 300 enemy ships emerged from faster-than-light travel near the mining colony of New Hope. He had 200 human vessels spread across 3 systems, and he was about to test Lisa Martinez's new protocol in full combat conditions. "All ships. This is Peterson." He broadcast on the fleet channel. "You know the drill. Chaos Protocol is now active. Fight however you want. Don't coordinate with anyone. Make it impossible for them to predict what we'll do next." What followed was the most disorganized battle in human military history, and that was exactly the point. Captain Ryan Hughes took his frigate straight at the enemy formation, all weapons firing, then suddenly reversed thrust and retreated. Lieutenant Sarah Kim circled her ship around a devourer vessel, firing in short bursts at random intervals. Commander Dale Spencer positioned his destroyer behind an asteroid and played dead until 3 devourer ships came to investigate, then ambushed them at point-blank range. One captain released all his escape pods as decoys. Another started spinning his ship while firing in all directions. A third decided to use his communications array to blast music at the devourers, mixing it with weapons fire. There was no pattern, no logic, no military doctrine. Just 300 human captains fighting their own personal war. Jack watched his tactical display with satisfaction as the devourer formation began to fall apart. Their ships kept shifting positions, trying to respond to threats that appeared and disappeared randomly. Some devourer vessels even started firing at empty space, apparently trying to predict where human ships would appear next. But the cost was high. Human ships were being destroyed. Jack watched as the frigate Courage took a direct hit and exploded. The destroyer Freedom broke apart under concentrated fire. The corvette Liberty rammed a devourer ship, and both vessels were lost in the explosion. "Sir, we've lost 62 ships," his tactical officer reported. "And the devourers?" Jack asked. "They've lost over 200. Jack allowed himself a tight smile. The exchange rate was in humanity's favor, but he knew these were just the advance forces. The main swarm was still coming. On Earth, Daniel coordinated the defense of 12 different battle zones. Each one was chaotic, desperate, and somehow working. The devourers were winning battles but losing ships at an unsustainable rate. More importantly, reports from Dr. Andrew Kim's analysis teams showed the hive intelligence was starting to show signs of stress. "Look at this engagement data from the Meridian cluster," Andrew said, showing Daniel the latest findings. "The devourers are taking longer to respond to new tactics. Their adaptation time has increased from 3 hours to almost 7 hours. The hive mind is getting slower, because we're overloading it with random data," Daniel said. "Exactly. But Daniel, We're running out of ships. Even with the favorable exchange rate, we can't sustain this level of losses. Daniel knew it was true. In 3 weeks of running battles, humanity had lost 40% of its military fleet. Every day brought new casualty reports. New names added to the list of those who had died defending human space. Lisa Martinez had lost friends in the fighting. Her old academy classmate died defending Jupiter Station. The pilot who taught her to fly took a suicide run into a Devourer mothership to save a transport full of civilians. Every report that came across her desk seemed to carry the name of someone she knew, but they kept fighting. The Battle of the Meridian Cluster became the turning point. It was humanity's largest engagement yet. 200 human vessels against 2,000 Devourer ships. The odds were impossible, but Captain Nicole Barnes led the defense with determination that bordered on fury. Nicole's orders to her fleet were simple. Make them earn every meter. Fight dirty. Fight smart. Fight mean. And whatever you do, don't fight predictable. Her ships used every trick they could think of. They hid behind planets and moons. They used gravity wells to slingshot themselves at unexpected angles. They fired weapons while retreating, advanced while not firing, and generally did everything that contradicted standard military tactics. One captain flew his ship backward through the entire battle, claiming the Devourers would expect ships to face forward. Another decided to fight in complete silence. No communications at all, making his ship impossible for the hive mind to coordinate against. A third captain had his crew manually aim weapons instead of using targeting computers, creating firing patterns that were slightly different every time. The battle lasted 14 hours. Nicole lost 60% of her fleet, including her own ship. The Ranger took critical damage in the final hour, and Nicole ordered an evacuation. She was the last one off, staying on the bridge until the ship's reactor went critical. She made it to an escape pod with 30 seconds to spare, but humanity destroyed 70% of the Devourer force. 2,000 ships entered the Meridian cluster. Only 600 left. Daniel met Nicole at the medical station 3 days later. She had a broken arm and burns across her left side, but she was alive. "I heard about the Ranger," he said. "I'm sorry. She was a good ship," Nicole said. "But we did what we needed to do." Did Andrew's analysis come through? It did. The Devourer hive mind showed significant deterioration during your battle. You damaged it, Nicole. Not just their ships, but their collective intelligence. Nicole managed to smile despite her injuries. Good. Because we lost a lot of good people earning that data. The human cost was becoming impossible to ignore. President Helen Grant attended memorial services every day. She met with families who had lost sons and daughters, husbands and wives, parents and children. The weight of command was crushing, but she carried it because someone had to. Andrew Kim barely slept anymore. He spent every waking hour analyzing Devourer debris, studying their biomechanical structure, looking for weaknesses. His team worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and determination. 3 weeks into the war, Andrew made his most important discovery yet. He called Daniel at 3 in the morning, too excited to wait until a reasonable hour. "I found it," Andrew said. "The critical weakness." Daniel was in his office, reviewing casualty reports. He hadn't slept properly in days. "Tell me." The Devourer adaptation ability works through their hive intelligence. Every ship is connected to a collective neural network. When they encounter a new threat, the network processes the data, develops a counter-strategy, and distributes it to all ships. It's incredibly efficient. "I know this already, Andrew. But here's what we didn't know. The network has limits. It can process enormous amounts of data, but it needs time. And more importantly, it needs the data to make sense. Pattern recognition requires patterns. If you flood the network with contradictory information, with tactics that have no logical connection to each other, the system starts to struggle." Daniel sat up straighter. "How much can we overload it? That's the question I've been working on. I think if we could hit them with enough simultaneous different attacks, if we could create absolute chaos across their entire network at once, we could cause a cascade failure. What would that look like? Every single ship in the hive would need to encounter a completely different threat at the same time. The network would try to process all of it, develop counters for all of it, and the system would crash under the load. It would be like asking a computer to solve 10,000 different equations simultaneously, all with contradictory parameters. How many different tactics would we need? Daniel asked. As many as we have ships. If we could get 10,000 different attack patterns happening at once, it might be enough. Daniel looked at his fleet roster. Between military vessels and armed civilian ships, humanity had just over 10,000 vessels left. It would mean committing everything they had in one massive, coordinated strike. Coordinated chaos. The ultimate contradiction. Start working on the protocol, Daniel ordered. We'll call it static burst. Every ship does something completely unique, all at the same time. There's a problem, Andrew said. We need them in one place. The Hive network has range limitations. If the Devourers are spread across multiple systems, we can't hit the whole network at once. Then we draw them in, Daniel said. We make them come to us. The main Devourer swarm was approaching the solar system. Intelligence put their numbers at over 50,000 ships, despite the losses they had taken. They were consolidating their forces, preparing for what they thought would be a final assault on humanity's home system. Daniel gathered his command staff and explained the plan. They would let the Devourers come to Earth. They would defend the outer planets, make them fight for every world. But ultimately they would fall back. They would draw the entire swarm into Earth's orbit, where every human ship could hit them at once with the static burst protocol. It's a massive risk, Patricia Cole said. If the protocol doesn't work, we'll have no reserves left. Earth will be defenseless. If the protocol doesn't work, we're dead anyway, Daniel replied. This is our one shot at breaking their hive mind completely. Lisa was put in charge of developing the chaos tactics. She created a database of 10,000 different attack patterns, each one completely unique. Some were aggressive, some defensive, some made no tactical sense at all. She distributed them to every ship captain with one instruction. Execute your assigned pattern when the signal comes, no matter what's happening around you. Nicole, recovered from her injuries, took command of a new ship and volunteered to lead the Jupiter defense. Jack Peterson positioned his forces at Neptune. Lisa herself would coordinate the Mars defense grid. They would fight a running battle from the outer solar system all the way back to Earth, buying time for every civilian to reach the deep space bunkers. The Devourer swarm entered the solar system on day 43 of the war. The sky above Neptune lit up with weapons fire as Jack's fleet engaged them. He held for 6 hours before falling back, having destroyed 500 Devourer ships at the cost of 200 human vessels. At Jupiter, Nicole fought from behind the planet's massive gravity well, using the moons as cover and the radiation belts as weapons. She held for 8 hours, destroying another 700 Devourer ships before retreating toward Mars. Lisa coordinated the Mars defense from the orbital command platform. Every weapon humanity had installed over decades of preparation opened fire at once. The Devourers crashed against the defense grid like a wave against rocks, and both shattered. Lisa watched as the platform took hit after hit, systems failing one by one. All forces, fall back to Earth, she ordered. This is the final defense. Static burst protocol will activate on my mark, as the battered remains of humanity's fleet regrouped around Earth. The Devourer swarm followed them. 50,000 ships entered Earth's orbit, surrounding the planet completely. Daniel stood on the bridge of the command ship Unity, watching the enemy close in. Around Earth, 10,000 human ships held their positions, each captain ready to execute their unique attack pattern. The moment had arrived. Humanity would either break the Devourer hive mind or die trying. Earth hung in space like a blue marble surrounded by fire. 50,000 Devourer ships formed a sphere around the planet, blocking out the stars. On the surface, billions of people watched the sky, knowing that everything depended on what happened in the next few hours. Daniel Wright stood on the bridge of the Unity, his command ship barely holding together after the fighting retreat from Mars. Around him, his crew worked in determined silence. Every screen showed Devourer positions, too many to count, too many to fight with conventional tactics. All ships report ready for static burst protocol. Lisa Martinez reported from her position at Tactical. Her station on Mars had been destroyed, but she had transferred her command to a cruiser orbiting Earth. 10,347 vessels, each with unique attack patterns programmed and ready. Civilian evacuations? Daniel asked. Complete, replied President Helen Grant from the secure bunker beneath Geneva. All non-combatants are in the deep shelters. Daniel, the whole world is watching. Whatever happens next, humanity faces it together. Daniel took a deep breath. Through the view screen, he could see Devourer ships beginning to move into attack formation. They had humanity exactly where they wanted them. Or so they thought. The Hive intelligence had probably calculated that surrounding Earth would force humanity to surrender or die. It had no way to understand that humans would choose a third option. Dr. Kim, confirm the analysis one more time, Daniel said. Andrew Kim appeared on the communication screen, looking exhausted but focused. The theory is sound. If we hit them with enough contradictory data simultaneously, their Hive network will crash. But Daniel, I need to be clear. This is theoretical. We've never tested it at this scale. If I'm wrong about the threshold, if the network is stronger than I calculated, we'll waste our only chance. And if you're right, then we might actually win this war. The Devourers began their attack. Energy weapons lanced out from 1,000 ships at once, striking Earth's orbital defenses. The defensive platforms returned fire, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. One by one, the platforms exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Sir, we're losing the orbital grid, reported Tactical Officer, Lieutenant Gary Foster. Hold position, Daniel ordered. All ships maintain defensive posture. Do not engage yet. It went against every military instinct to sit and watch the enemy destroy their defenses. But static burst required perfect timing. They needed the Devourers fully committed, their entire swarm focused on Earth, before triggering the protocol. Nicole Barnes commanded a squadron of frigates positioned near the moon. She watched the Devourer attack with growing anxiety. Unity, this is Barnes. How long do we wait? They're tearing apart our defenses. Hold your position, Captain, Daniel replied. Trust the plan. The orbital platforms were gone within 20 minutes. The Devourers began descending toward Earth's atmosphere, confident in their victory. They had broken through the defenses, and now the planet itself lay open before them. Now, Daniel said quietly. Then louder. All ships, execute static burst protocol. Give them chaos. What happened next would be studied by military historians for generations, assuming humanity survived to have military historians. 10,000 human ships attacked simultaneously, each one doing something completely different. Ryan Hughes fired his missiles in a spiral pattern while spinning his ship clockwise. Sarah Kim released all her escape pods in one direction, while flying in another, each pod carrying a small explosive charge. Dale Spencer used his communications array to broadcast white noise while firing lasers in a random sequence. One captain flew straight at a Devourer ship, then stopped dead and reversed course. Another circled around doing barrel rolls while firing at irregular intervals. A third fired all weapons at once, then went completely dark for 30 seconds, then fired again. Some ships worked in pairs, but each pair used different coordination strategies. Some trios formed triangles, others flew in lines. Some squadrons moved in formation. Others deliberately flew into each other's firing paths. The civilian ships were even more creative. Mining vessels used industrial cutting lasers. Transport ships released cargo containers as kinetic weapons. A luxury yacht somebody had armed with torpedo tubes fired in time to classical music. A cargo hauler released thousands of small metal balls that spread across the battlefield like buckshot. Every weapon system humanity had ever invented was being used. Missiles, lasers, kinetic rounds, plasma cannons, electromagnetic pulses, particle beams. Some ships combined weapons in strange ways. Others used them in isolation. There was no logic, no pattern, no way to predict what any individual ship would do next. Daniel watched his tactical display as 10,000 different data points created a storm of chaos across the battlefield. "Andrew, are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it," Andrew replied, his voice tight with tension. "The Devourer network is trying to process all of it. Energy readings are spiking across their entire formation. The hive intelligence is working at maximum capacity, but the Devourers were still fighting back. Their return fire was devastating. Human ships began to die by the dozens, then by the hundreds. The destroyer Valor exploded under concentrated fire. The cruiser Defiant broke apart. The frigate Courage was cut in half by a Devourer energy beam. Jack Peterson's ship took a direct hit that knocked out his main engines. "This is Peterson. I'm dead in space but still firing. Somebody drag me out of here when this is over." Nicole's squadron lost 4 ships in the first minute of combat. She kept broadcasting orders even as her own vessel shook under enemy fire. "Keep hitting them. Don't stop. Don't give them time to adapt." The casualties mounted rapidly. Daniel watched the numbers climb with a sick feeling in his stomach. 2,000 ships lost. 3,000. 4,000. At this rate, they would be wiped out in less than an hour. "Andrew, is it working?" Daniel demanded. "I don't know yet. The network is under incredible stress, but it's still functional. We might need more time." "We don't have more time," Lisa said. She was firing her ship's weapons personally, having taken over from a wounded crew member. "At this rate, we'll be down to half strength in 30 minutes. Then something strange began to happen. Some of the Devourer ships started firing at empty space. Others shot at their own vessels. A few just stopped moving entirely, hanging motionless in space while the battle raged around them. "The network is fragmenting," Andrew said, his voice rising with excitement. "It's happening. The hive intelligence is starting to fail. But it's not a complete collapse yet. We need to push harder." "Push harder with what?" Daniel shouted. "We're throwing everything we have at them." That was when Andrew had his second breakthrough. "Wait, it's not about the physical attacks. Look at the data. The Devourers are trying to counter our weapons, but that's only part of what's overloading them. They're also trying to understand our tactics, our motivations, our decision-making process. So their hive intelligence is designed to process tactical data. Weapon types, attack patterns, defensive positions. It's not designed to process emotion, irrationality, or abstract concepts. Daniel, we need to hit them with something the network has no framework to understand." Daniel understood immediately. "Lisa, broadcast to all ships. Tell them to transmit everything that makes them human. Music, pictures, messages, anything and everything that shows what we're fighting for." The order went out, and humanity responded in the most human way possible. They started broadcasting their lives. One ship transmitted recordings of a child's birthday party. Another sent images of Earth's oceans, forests, and mountains. A captain broadcast his wedding video. Another transmitted her favorite symphony. Some sent poetry. Others sent family photos. One ship broadcast a recording of laughter. The Devourer Hive network, built to process tactical data and develop counter-strategies, suddenly found itself trying to process human emotion. It encountered concepts it had no reference for: love, hope, joy, grief, determination, sacrifice. The effect was immediate and devastating to the Devourers. Their ships began shutting down in groups. Some collided with each other as their coordination failed. Others just drifted, their systems going dark as the hive intelligence crashed under the weight of processing data it was never designed to handle. "It's working," Andrew said, watching the readings in disbelief. "The network is collapsing. They can't process emotional data. It's creating cascade failures across the entire hive." But the battle was far from over. Even as some Devourer ships went dormant, others continued fighting with mechanical determination. They had lost their collective intelligence, but their individual weapon systems still functioned. Daniel's ship, the Unity, took a critical hit. The bridge exploded in sparks and smoke. He felt something strike his side, felt pain blossom across his ribs. He fell, but pulled himself back to his feet, blood staining his uniform. "Sir, you're hit." Gary shouted. I'm fine, Daniel lied. Keep fighting. Lisa's ship was crippled, drifting without power. She and her crew continued to fight using manual controls, firing weapons that were never meant to be aimed by hand. This is Martinez. My ship is out of the fight, but we're still breathing. Somebody finish this. Nicole's vessel was on fire, life support failing. She ordered her crew to the escape pods, but stayed at her post. I can still fire weapons. I'm not leaving until this is done. Patricia Cole's flagship was torn apart by Devourer fire. She managed to transmit one last order before communications failed. All ships, press the attack. Make every shot count. Jack Peterson, still drifting in his damaged destroyer, used his remaining power to fire one last missile salvo. For Earth, he transmitted. For humanity. All across the battlefield, humans fought with everything they had. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and dying by the thousands. But they kept fighting because that was what humans did. They faced impossible odds and fought anyway. The Devourer Hive network finally collapsed completely 6 hours into the battle. Andrew's readings showed the cascade failure spreading through the entire swarm. Without the collective intelligence to coordinate them, the Devourer ships became nothing more than individual targets. All ships, Daniel transmitted, forcing words through the pain in his side. The Hive is down. They're vulnerable. Finish them. What remained of humanity's fleet pressed forward. They had started with 10,000 ships. Now fewer than 3,000 remained operational. But those 3,000 fell on the disabled Devourer vessels with grim determination. The battle that followed was more execution than combat. Dormant Devourer ships were destroyed one by one. Those that still fought did so without coordination, making them easy targets for human forces that had spent weeks learning to fight chaos. When the last Devourer ship exploded, there was no cheering. The human forces were too exhausted, too battered, too aware of what the victory had cost. Daniel sat in his damaged command chair, holding his wounded side, and looked at the casualty reports. 40% of the fleet destroyed. 15% of Earth's civilian population dead from the orbital bombardment. Hundreds of thousands of military personnel lost. But Earth still stood. Humanity had survived. Sir, Gary said quietly, we're receiving transmissions from outside the solar system. It's the alien species. They're asking what happened. The medical bay on the Unity was filled beyond capacity. Daniel Wright sat on an examination table while a doctor wrapped his ribs, which had been cracked by shrapnel during the final battle. Around him, wounded crew members received treatment. Many far worse off than he was. You should be resting, Admiral, the doctor said. They had promoted Daniel during the battle, though he barely remembered it happening. I'll rest when this is finished, Daniel replied. His communication device was buzzing constantly with incoming messages from across the galaxy. The alien species that had fled were starting to return, and they all wanted answers. Lisa Martinez appeared in the doorway, moving slowly with bandages visible under her uniform. She had survived when her ship's life support failed, barely making it to an escape pod in time. The Galactic Council wants to convene an emergency session. They're asking us to attend. Bye. Tell them we'll be there when we're ready, Daniel said. We have our own people to take care of first. On Earth's surface, rescue operations continued around the clock. The Devourer orbital bombardment had destroyed 3 major cities before the battle ended. Geneva, Tokyo, and Cape Town were gone, reduced to rubble by energy weapons that humanity barely understood. Millions had died, but billions survived because people like Nicole Barnes and Jack Peterson had held the line. President Helen Grant walked through a refugee center in what remained of Paris. Families who had lost their homes surrounded her, and she spoke to each one personally. This was the price of victory, the cost of standing alone when everyone else ran. Dr. Andrew Kim worked in a laboratory that had somehow survived the battle intact. Around him, samples of Devourer biomechanical tissue sat in containment units. He was making sure the threat would never return, analyzing every piece of debris to confirm the Hive intelligence was truly dead. It's gone, he reported to Daniel later that day. The network that connected them is completely destroyed. The individual ships we disabled are just empty shells now. There's no coming back from what we did to them. You saved us all, Daniel said. Your theory about overloading the hive mind with emotional data worked. I had the theory, Andrew replied. But it was humanity that provided the weapon. Every person who transmitted their memories, their music, their love for this world. That's what broke them. The Devourers were built to fight technology. They had no defense against hope. The Zenthari were the first to return. Their ships appeared at the edge of the solar system 3 days after the battle, moving cautiously as if they expected the Devourers to still be there. Ambassador Helen Chen, who had led the Zenthari telepaths in their retreat, requested permission to approach Earth. Daniel met her on Unity Prime, the galactic station that had sat abandoned during the entire war. The council chamber was empty, except for the two of them. Helen's translucent form shimmered with an emotion that Daniel's translator rendered as shame. We monitored the battle, she said quietly. Our telepaths felt the moment when the Devourer hive intelligence collapsed. We sensed something we thought impossible. Humanity won. Yes, Daniel said simply. We calculated your chances at 0.003%. Our best scientists, our most powerful computers, all agreed. Victory was mathematically impossible. Mathematics doesn't account for stubbornness. Helen was quiet for a long moment. I came to apologize. We abandoned you. We left you to face an ancient threat alone because we believed survival required retreat. We were wrong. Daniel looked at the alien ambassador with tired eyes. You did what your species needed to do. I won't pretend it didn't hurt, being left alone. But I understand. You have your people to protect, just like we do. How did you win? Helen asked. Please. I need to understand. 17 civilizations fell to the Devourers, all more advanced than humanity. What did you have that they lacked? We had chaos, Daniel said. Every species that fought them before had a unified strategy. The Devourers adapted because they could predict patterns. We didn't give them patterns. We gave them 10,000 different tactics happening at once, and their hive mind couldn't process it. But even that should not have been enough. The Devourers could have overwhelmed you through sheer numbers. Daniel smiled slightly. That's where Dr. Kim's discovery came in. We didn't just hit them with random tactics. We hit them with humanity itself. Music, art, love, hope, all the things that make us who we are. The Devourer network was built to counter weapons. It had no defense against emotion. Helen's form brightened with understanding. You weaponized your culture. Your very nature as a species became the attack. We fought with everything we had, Daniel said. Our ships, our courage, and our humanity. In the end, it was enough. The Krav Empire arrived next, their massive warships dwarfing the human vessels still on patrol around Earth. War Master Krath requested a meeting with Earth's military command. He met with Admiral Patricia Cole, who had survived the battle despite her flagship being destroyed. Patricia met him in full dress uniform, standing straight despite the pain from her injuries. The Krav War Master was 3 times her size, covered in armor plating that had protected his species through 1,000 conflicts. He looked at the small human with something approaching respect. We reviewed your combat footage, Krath said, his voice like grinding stone. Your tactics violated every principle of warfare we hold sacred. You had no coordination, no unified command structure, no logical strategy. And yet we won, Patricia replied. And yet you won, Krath agreed. The Krav Empire fights with discipline, with overwhelming force applied according to established doctrine. We thought this was the only path to victory. You proved us wrong. Your chaos defeated an enemy that crushed civilizations built on order. Will you remember that lesson? Patricia asked. Krath was silent for a moment. We will. The Krav Empire honors strength. And humanity has shown strength beyond what we believed possible. When we write the history of this war, we will record the truth. That humanity stood when all others fled, and that humanity alone defeated the Devourers. The Velen Concordate came last, their science vessels filling orbit around Earth. The Velen science master who had told Daniel that extinction was inevitable appeared on the communication screen, her delicate features showing genuine remorse. "I told you that your courage was admirable, but your extinction was inevitable," she said. "I was wrong, and I offer my deepest apology." Helen Grant took this meeting personally. She sat in the rebuilt command center and looked at the alien who had written humanity off as dead. "Your calculations were based on logic and probability, but humans don't always follow logic. We are beginning to understand that," the Velen replied. "Our scientists have studied your battle data for days now. We still cannot fully explain how you won. The mathematics should not have allowed it." End quote. Inning 1. "Maybe some things can't be calculated," Helen said. "Maybe there are victories that exist outside your equations. We would like to study your methods. With your permission, we want to learn how you achieved the impossible. Not to copy you, but to understand. Our entire civilization is built on logic and reason. You have shown us there are other paths to success." Helen considered the request. "You can study our methods, but understand something. What we did worked because it was human. Another species trying to copy us might fail because they're not us. The chaos worked because it came naturally to us. We've been fighting each other in unpredictable ways for our entire history. It wasn't a tactic we invented. It was who we are." 1 month after the battle, the Galactic Council reconvened for the first time since the evacuation. Every species sent representatives, and Unity Prime buzzed with activity as aliens who had fled now returned to see the results of humanity's stand. Daniel stood before the full council as humanity's representative. He wore his admiral's uniform, though he would have preferred to stay on Earth helping with reconstruction. Beside him stood Lisa, Andrew, Nicole, and Jack, each of them bearing the scars of the war they had fought. The council chamber fell silent as Daniel began to speak. "6 weeks ago, you all fled from this station. You calculated your odds of survival and made the logical choice to retreat. You offered us evacuation slots, a chance to preserve some small portion of our species. We refused. We chose to stand and fight, knowing the odds, knowing we would probably die." He paused, looking around at the assembled aliens. "I won't lie and say your choice didn't hurt. It did. Standing alone while the rest of the galaxy ran was the hardest thing humanity has ever done. We watched your ships leave and wondered if we were making a mistake, if we were throwing away our future for pride." The Zenthari ambassador started to speak, but Daniel held up a hand. "But I don't stand here to condemn you. I understand why you left. You have civilizations thousands of years old, populations in the trillions, histories worth preserving. The logical choice was to survive, to preserve what you had built, to wait for the threat to pass. Humanity made a different choice. We chose to fight not because we thought we would win, but because running felt wrong. We're a young species, barely out among the stars. We haven't built great empires or achieved the technological heights you have. But we have something that served us well in this war. We have the ability to look at impossible odds and fight anyway." Daniel activated a holographic display showing Earth, scarred but whole. "We won. Not because we were stronger or smarter or more advanced. We won because we were unpredictable, because we were chaotic, because we weaponized our own humanity and threw it at an enemy that had no defense against hope and determination." He looked directly at each council member. "The devourers are gone. The threat you fled from is defeated. You can return to your homes, rebuild what you abandoned, and continue your civilizations. And you can do so, knowing that humanity stood in the gap. We paid the price in blood that your retreat allowed you to avoid." The council chamber was completely silent now. "So here is what I propose," Daniel continued. "You come back. You rebuild. But you remember what happened here. You remember that when the galaxy faced its darkest hour, it was humanity that held the line. And maybe, just maybe, the next time, An impossible threat appears. You'll think twice before running. The Zenthari ambassador spoke first. We will remember. The telepaths among our people sensed every moment of your battle. We felt your fear, your courage, your determination to protect your world no matter the cost. It was humbling to witness. You have shown us that there are things more important than survival calculations. The Krav Warmaster stood. The Empire acknowledges the debt we owe. Humanity stood when we retreated. You fought when we counseled surrender. Your victory has earned you a permanent place in our histories and our respect. The Velen Science Master added, You have taught us that some answers exist outside our equations. The Concordate offers our resources to help rebuild Earth. It is the least we can do. End MB and C. 8T. End 8T. One by one, every species on the Council stood and acknowledged what humanity had done. They offered resources, technology, and aid in rebuilding what the war had destroyed. They offered formal alliances and promises of support. They offered everything except what humanity had needed 6 weeks ago, which was someone to stand beside them in the fight. Daniel accepted their offers graciously but without excessive gratitude. Humanity had earned this respect in blood and fire. They had paid for it with millions of lives lost, cities destroyed, and wounds that would take generations to heal. After the council session ended, Daniel stood alone in the observation deck of Unity Prime. Earth was visible in the distance, a blue world surrounded by the debris of the battle that had saved it. Lisa found him there an hour later. The council is offering us a permanent seat, she said. Full membership, equal voice in all decisions. They want humanity to help lead the galaxy going forward. What do you think we should do? Daniel asked. Lisa looked out at Earth. I think we should accept. Not because we need them, but because maybe they need us. Someone has to teach them that running isn't always the answer. Daniel nodded slowly. Andrew is staying on Earth. He says his fighting days are over. He wants to teach, to make sure the next generation understands what we learned. And you? I'm staying too. Someone needs to make sure they never forget. Never forget that we stood alone. Never forget what it cost. 1 year later, a memorial was built on Earth in the ruins of Geneva. It listed every name of everyone who died, defending humanity from the devourers. Military personnel. Civilians caught in the bombardment. Everyone who paid the ultimate price so that others could live. At the dedication ceremony, representatives from every species in the galaxy stood in silence. The Zenthari elder spoke words that were recorded and transmitted across known space. We fled to preserve our species. Humans stayed to preserve hope. We calculated survival. They calculated what survival meant. We chose logic. They chose courage. And in doing so, they saved us all. The galaxy would not forget. The war against the devourers would be remembered as the moment humanity proved itself. Not just as survivors, but as defenders. They had stood when others fled. They had fought when others surrendered. They had won when victory was impossible. And Earth, scarred but strong, continued to spin in space. Its people rebuilt their cities, honored their dead, and looked to the stars with the same determination that had saved them. Because in the end, humanity had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the burden of war falls on those least prepared to carry it, and sometimes those people find the strength to bear it anyway.